Websummit. My name is Erik-Wilhelm, coming from Region Halland, invest in Halland, but I'm also the Vice Chairman of Great, and that's why I'm here to introduce these 3 analysts from IQ talking about what happened at Websummit. The clicker with me.
Hopefully, the big one, that one.
Not. There. So what is Great? Great started 2004. It's the broadband and IT infrastructure cluster in West Sweden. And it was formed to enhance the IT infrastructure. We thought it was bad. It was quite okay. But the problem was it was not well known. To talk about the infrastructure, but also how to use it. And this is a way for West Sweden to be more tech agile, be more in the forefront, etc. But we need to do it together. And then we have this community, a non-profit organization. And it's a meeting point, academy, municipalities, big companies, small companies working together. And then we have programs like this. So this is a very typical Great event, but the other ones can be more niche, more techy, more for municipalities, etc. So, and what are we talking about in Great? Cybersecurity is one thing, hospitality is one thing, AI is one thing, 5G, etc. So I think my main recommendation to all of you looking here, be members of Great. Come to seminars, encourage your boss, your superiors, that your organization should be a member of Great. That was my last word. So, and by this, I would like to welcome Johanna, Millie, and Rebecka on stage, please.
If you could go back in time to 1989, what would you change about the way the web is built? And these days, the question often comes with an undertone that actually says, how on earth did we get here? And how can we fix it?
There's actually a big difference looking back at the last couple of years of Websummit. It is a big difference, but it's also very, very much the same. It's the same topics coming back year after year. But this year we could see a real change. It's the tone of voice has been raised. The focus has shifted. We are moving from pledges and promises into actions. Websummit is a tech conference and it uses tech as an enabler for change. We didn't hear so much talking about cool new inventions, but most of the talks were about how to use tech, moving into the next stage, into the next era, creating a new tomorrow. So tech is the tool for driving change. Last year, we didn't hear one talk didn't mentioning the pandemic, and this year, looking back at it, we can't recollect that we actually heard one talk didn't mentioning the pandemic. The pandemic is still very, very present. Websummit sold out, 43,000 people gather in Lisbon in this arena area. And every morning we were standing there with our face mask on, trying to keep our distance, waiting to get our COVID certificate scanned so we could be let into the arena area. So we're not in a post-COVID state. We're not in the post-pandemic state. We are in the late pandemic. It was a hybrid event this year. And it was a historical event in so many ways, because for the first time in Websummit history, and as a milestone in tech, it was more female attendees than there were men.
Women and diversity in general should be leading the next generation of technological companies.
You make the difference. You change the world.
Goal is to design with people in mind, design with the most marginalized in mind, design with equity and real justice in mind.
And when Facebook is criticized, when people say your platform's doing horrible things, they say, we also brought you Black Lives Matter. In fact, I'm going to read a quote.
Will this impact Facebook's business?
Well, I think the most important thing to think about is that if it doesn't, then democracy and our ability to make our own choices may never recover.
So will we recover? Can we fix it? Questions like these ones were frequently asked during this year's Web Summit. And as Johanna said previously, there was a clear and consistent theme throughout the conference. No matter the topic, the subject, the speakers, it's clear that we have to start to take action. And we saw a lot of great examples of this and people talking about taking action in different through different initiatives, ranging from activism for racial justice to whistleblowing in the private and public and government sector. For example, during opening night of Web Summit, they started strong with Frances Haugen, commonly known as the Facebook whistleblower. And she has never before appeared on a public stage. So this was a huge event for her personally, but also for Web Summit as a whole. She was quite nervous. She doesn't like to be in the spotlight. And her story has been one of the biggest ones during 2021 when she left Facebook. She was a product manager at Facebook and she left. And when she did that, she exposed tens of thousands of documents that she says proves that Facebook has been lying about their efforts to tackle hate speech and misinformation. And her talk was one of the most explosive and revelatory talks during the entire summit. And she did this with the support of an organization called Whistleblower Aid. It's quite small organization that was founded in 2017. But their impact worldwide has already been earth-shattering. So they are involved in the exposure of the Trump-Ukraine scandal, the downfall of Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein, and most recently, the exposure of corruption in the Irish government. So back to Frances. She worked at Facebook, now Meta. And Facebook and Meta is always a hot topic at Web Summit, and this year was no different. And she really emphasized the problems with the organization and the company. She says there's been a pattern of behavior at Facebook where they consistently prioritize their own profits over our general safety. And so what her talk taught us is that we have this huge company with a lot of power over the world, over our people. And instead of putting their resources and efforts into making sure that we have some sort of minimum general safety on the platform, they prioritize growth in new areas and going forward as well in the new brand. And this leads to, the spread of more misinformation on the internet and hate speech being spread, and we don't have control of the privacy of our users anymore. So we see a lot of people taking action, and people like Frances are really important to bring these important conversations to light. And this was one great example of that. So regardless of the issues that we see with these platforms, we still have to face the fact that they are an important enabler to help people to get their voices heard in different situations and different movements. And one great example of that, I think you all know, is the Black Lives Matter movement. They have been called the largest movement in US history. And the importance of tech for the movement to move forward has been fundamental. So it all started with a simple hashtag that was born out of sadness and frustration over all the murders in the US. And that has, brought this global rally cry for racial justice. And during opening night, we had the opportunity to listen to Ayo, formerly known as Opal Tometi. People are waiting in the lobby. And her powerful speech, her speech was one of the most anticipated during the entire conference. And she was hopeful. She said that she is so excited for the time that we're living in, where technology can actually help us to move things forward. She also talked about, of course, the challenges with these platforms and, with threats and hate speech and people sharing their word and their voices and receive threats in different situations. And when she started this movement, she had no idea in the many ways that the platforms would be used. She had no idea that, you know, after the first murder of Trayvon Martin, there would be more. And she didn't know how many people will actually need these platforms to, you know, get their voices heard and find allies in this fight for racial justice. Another area where we see activism rising up is within sustainability. And I had the opportunity to listen to a really cool guy called Nashson Mimram. He is the CEO and co-founder of TO.org. And he talked about how companies have to stop just complying to others and have to start differentiating in this fight for sustainability, and how we can use and harness the power of creativity and brand to, you know, create innovation in sustainability and move forward. And he shared an interesting case where they used creative activism, or what do you call it? Constructive provocation. In this case, they called Naughty Barbie. So his daughter came up to him one day and she said she wanted a new Barbie doll, but she didn't want the ones that were, you know, on the market, because apparently this small girl, you know, she's aware of the unsustainable materials they're made of. I don't know if you're aware of that when you're a small kid, but that's what he said. So what he did, he asked a couple of friends to 3D print a Barbie doll made from upcycled materials. And they put her in a box and sent her to Mattel, which is the company that creates Barbie, with this message saying, "Your Barbie is dirty, come play with us." And when you do something like that, you might expect a lawsuit or, you know, something bad happening. But what happened instead is that together, Nashson and Barbie, or Mattel, created and launched Barbie Loves the Ocean this summer, which is a collection made entirely from upcycled materials. And apparently their stock prices went up a lot as well. So that was a great bonus for them. So we have a lot of great examples, but we still have a very long way to go. That's very clear from this year's conference as well. And there's a lot to be done still.
Sustainability is a major thing, and it was a major thing during this year's conference as well, but in multiple meanings. So we talked about sustainability for creating workplaces that are sustainable, products, design, corporations, and creating and giving the timing of the conference, because the UN climate conference in Glasgow was ongoing during the same period as the Web Summit. So carbon emissions and net zero pledges was a really big thing, and calculating those carbon emissions is really complex. And it's clear that net zero and carbon is something that we're going to hear a lot about the coming period of time. And we have a lot of things here that we can talk about. Brad Smith from Microsoft, he came on stage and had this big talk about corporations doing net zero pledges. It's a big trend that every corporation is having a pledge about being net zero or carbon neutral. And that's really, really good, but we are lacking the progress. Few corporations are actually calculating and showing progress in the right way, and we can't really measure net zero in a global sense away, because most of the companies does not include their supply chain in the calculation, meaning that they only look at their own end product and how they are net zero, but doesn't look through the whole ecosystem. And car manufacturing was a really hot topic when you're coming to the supply chain, because car manufacturers has a really, really spread supply chains. It's come from a lot of places, and it's a lot of shipment and logistics around it. And that is actually one of the biggest issue, calculating net zero or carbon neutral, since the supply chain is so many companies and so many products involved.
Yes, talking sustainability, a lot of things, like it ended up a lot of discussions into like private car ownership. And a stage was fully set for talking about mobility one day, and I listened. And movement as a service, super hot, of course. And both Bolt, the CEO of Bolt, and Voy was there, and both of them talked about how to build better cities and how to improve quality of life in the cities where we live. And they both argued that if we can reduce the number of private cars in our cities, we can reach that. But how do we do that? Because as many of you know, as I know, having a private car is convenient at many times. And they also said that it's not possible to replace a private car, but by just adding one more product, one new product to the market. We need many different ways to make that happen. It's for like picking up your kids at daycare. It's for getting food home to your house. It's going to the summer house. You have many different purposes. Your private car has many different purposes, and that's why we need taxis. We need carpool. We need electrical scooters. Maybe we need bikes. But the challenge that this on-demand service faces is that in order to stop using a private car, you need transport when at the time when you need it. So it really has to be on demand, there when you need it and at the exact time. And that is a huge challenge because otherwise we have this convenience conflict. And our cities, they are built for cars, they argued today. Discussions were when can we start to see a change? When can we see a reduce of private cars? And they said maybe in 5-10 years, something like that. And talking about getting food home to your house, I listened to a super interesting chat by a company that does drone delivery. And I thought, what? Already? Is it happening? And apparently, yes, in Ireland, in a few cities there, they can transport about 2 kilos of groceries and food to people's homes. And they need approximately 2 square meters to land on a spot. And it's quick, it's cheap, and it's low CO2 compared to road-based delivery. So it's interesting to see what's happening there in the future. And just a question, do you know what the most asked, what most people ordered? Coffee, surprisingly. And he also said that how to scale, what do they need to solve in order to scale, and that's safety for the drone itself and for the people below it. So it should be able to come back home, no matter the weather. And if something happens, it should be able to land in a safe way. Another one talking about safety was Stan Bolen, working with automotive autonomous cars. And there is the same issue. The thing to crack is safety. And there were a lot of discussions regarding autonomous cars. And it is a bigger problem than expected. It takes more time than expected because the topic is very complex. And they touched based on a few things. One thing being that you add a lot of advanced sensors from different manufacturers, all of them error prone, into a vehicle that you place in a complex environment, and you want it to be safe. And there's a contradiction in itself. They also said that to create a prototype that you have in a controlled environment is not that tricky, but the accidents happen when the unexpected happen. So you need a lot of more training into these machines in order to make them safe at all times. And one thing that they argued could speed up this development is if there would be a closer collaboration between automotive companies and tech companies. Because tech companies, they want to be automotive companies, but they're not. And automotive companies, they lack a bit of the knowledge, tech knowledge. So when can we see this happening? When will we have autonomous cars on our roads? They said that shortly we'll see more and more autonomous features, like things that you can turn on and off in your car, assistive driving kind of things. And in the middle of this decade, we might see like autonomous trucks and transport of goods. And perhaps in the end of this decade, they thought we might see even for personal transport, but we'll see.
So one interesting aspect to sustainability is consumer behavior. Are we willing to pay the actual price? Because it will cost money to be more sustainable, because the products are the price is going to increase, since manufacturing non-sustainable products is cheaper than the sustainable ones. And Shell's CEO was there talking about travel as an example. There are possibilities to fuel their jets with sustainable fuel. But no one is actually interested in paying 5-10 times the price for going on a weekend to London. So consumer behavior is going to be a really critical thing when we are talking sustainability in the long run. So there are a couple of companies that stands out from the crowd, both in their way of line of business, but also in their pledges. So we have the French shoe brand Veja, I think it's pronounced. They have stated, and their own mission is to create a real sustainable sneaker, and to be able to be completely transparent through all the supply chain, and how they hire people in their warehouses, and how they pay the farmers that are growing this cotton. They have they have a limited edition of each sneaker, because the cotton that they are using is now grown in a completely new kind of way to be sustainable. So for each row of cotton, they have 1 row of beans and 1 row of corn, which means that you get third amount of cotton, since the corn and the beans are making the soil better, so you can continue farming. So, and one of their biggest intention is the brand that they create and they stand for. They want to be personal, have personal liability, and be able to really stand up for their own cause and for the brand. Northvolt, the Swedish battery cell manufacturer, they have pledges that they will be the world's greenest battery cell. And they also are doing the same thing as they are doing. They have been traveling around the world, trying, visiting all the mines, visiting all the factories of the supply chain, to really make sure that the companies they are using are sustainable and are doing what they promise. H&M, famous for fast fashion, are also now, we talked about it a couple of years ago, that their pledge is to be climate positive in 2040. And they are really starting to show progress now. So trying to move away from fast fashion, they have entered personal sizes, meaning I can get my body scanned, and they will sew my, they will create the manufacture the jeans for me, and they will be perfect fit. They have this that you see here, this recycle loop machine in some of the stores. You can go into a store, you can leave your fabric, and you can see it be recycled into new materials that can be used in manufacturing. So they are moving away from fast fashion and large quantities and trying to be more on demand, trying to be more personalized, creating products for me as a consumer and not for the big audience. Oh, and one of the coolest new products from H&M is they have made and launched right now a pair of sunglasses that is made from carbon that they have caught from the air in one of those carbon air system and created a sunglasses. So it's recycled carbon from the air that now is a product.
Yes, so these are some really great examples of brands taking responsibility within the sustainability issues. And it's really clear, I mean, throughout the conference, but also in the time we live in now, that brands have a huge responsibility when it comes to global issues. And this is a responsibility that they haven't asked for, but the way we behave and, you know, the way we move forward, this is where we are at now. So people in general, they trust brands more than they trust their own governments and other, you know, people elected institutions and so forth. And what happens when brands have this uncontrolled power and they have to take responsibility, and if they don't take that seriously, is that brands and campaigns can be misleading. And especially within sustainability, there has been a lot of accusations about greenwashing and routinely misleading campaigns, you know, towards the general public about their green credentials. And H&M was one of those companies, but as Johanna said, they're now working really hard on improving their brand and what their purpose and what they stand for. Because let's face it, people are smart. We see through the bullshit. You know, your brand is not just a logotype anymore. It has to permeate the entire company now. And the brand is more important now than it ever has been before. We heard a lot of people talking about this last year at Web Summit. It's still really important. So your brand and the purpose of your company, you know, it has to fit, it has to match, and it has to be something you work really hard on, because people see through the brand, they see your company. Jacob Ben Boonen, I think his name is, he's the CEO and co-founder of Saffron Brand Consultants. He said that brand is the lens we use when we look at things. So the brand is kind of the gateway into your company. So it has to be, you know, your purpose has to be clear. It's really important. And what's behind, you know, creating strong brands is great design. That's one of the key things for creating a good and strong brand. So design helps your vision come alive, and it helps your strategy to become more tangible as well. He said that designers make things look good. Good designers make things look excellent, and excellent designers makes brands work. And what I found interesting about this is that Saffron Brand Consultants were actually a big part of the new rebranding of Facebook and Meta. So that quote, you know, if you think about it, it kind of leads back to the question about responsibility and big issues. There's a big discussion going on about Facebook, privacy and security. So he kind of says that they're excellent designers that make this brand work. We're going to come back to Facebook further on, but it raises questions, and when you think about it. So your brand is more important than ever. You have to be honest. You have to stay true to your purpose and be transparent, you know, against the general public.
It's a lot of talk about brands, but also the brand topic coming into a lot of different sessions. We are way past the time where a marketing department was the sole responsible for the brand. Now it's owned by the entire company. And we need to have a more holistic view of our brand. It covers the customer experience, the business experience, and the employee experience. And it's a lot of work to get there, but it's worth it. And one super interesting panel discussion that I listened into, and this quote is taken from there: when brand becomes culture, it's evolved. Sitting at another talk by the CEO of Bolt, and he was they questioned or they asked him how come they become so successful during a pandemic, like how? And he said that we didn't let anybody go at the company. When the pandemic struck, we didn't let anybody go because we knew that we needed this talent. We wanted the same people. We didn't want to let anybody go. But then, like a bit controversially, they asked their employees if they could lower their salaries for a while. And apparently they did. And the employees, they found the purpose and the passion in the company. to stay. So when different cities opened up a bit more, people started traveling, they could hit the ground running. Another quote that I could have taken from this panel discussion with Catherine Kilb and Miriam Sauer was that customers come because of interest and stays because of belonging. And it's the same for employees. And the challenge is, how can we be the place where the people we want to come working with us comes?
So there's new possibilities. The pandemic helped us in so many ways, accelerating new ways of working and new ways of thinking about the workplace and what we can do with it. So the possibilities are great here. Workers can choose companies from wherever, and companies can choose workers from wherever. There are some downsides. Some companies has tried to use it as buying low cost workers, but that's not the right way of looking at it, because when you're having teams spread, geographically spread, it's really, really important to have the core values of your company being reflected in your staff. It's really important that you as a company know your values, that you communicate your values, that you are present, and that you can actually care for your workers even though that you aren't meeting them. And that's also one of the problems, that trust is built usually. It's easier to build trust when you see each other and you can look each other in the eyes and you can really have a discussion. Remote and hybrid are here to stay, and everybody that we listen to are testimonying into that this is something that we will see moving on. Hybrid is the hardest part, because as soon as someone is online, everybody needs to be online. So even though you have 9 out of 10 in the office, you still need to do the meeting online, because the 10th person, if everybody doesn't have the camera and are present in the meeting, the person sitting remote is going to be less involved in the discussions. It's going to be feeling left out. So leadership and management is always a big thing during Web Summit, since it's a lot about big companies and entrepreneurs and how to move into the future. And what was discussed this year is that you have to have a new set of leaders. You have to separate the management and the leaders. So you have your leaders in your day-to-day life, and then you have the company leaders and management that will be doing strategic work and vision and carrying the culture all over the company. And then you have your day-to-day manager that needs to be present and really be there for everybody, even if you're remote. But one thing that is clear, and that also a lot of people shed light on during this year's conference, is that we are in a small bubble. The majority of the population, they are not actually able to work remote. So what we are discussing in this bubble that we are in is not applicable for everybody.
Yes, and even for people working home, women, men, we see that the pandemic has affected women more negatively than men in many ways. We see the facts, statistics that show this. So for example, the majority of people who lost their jobs due to the pandemic were women. The women workforce has dropped radically. 54 million women left the workforce during the pandemic. Johanna said that we're starting to work from home. Companies are allowed to do that in a new way, which is a great opportunity for a lot of people, if you can, of course. But it usually ends up being the woman staying at home, because she's seen as the primary caregiver in a family, in a relationship. So she can work from home, take care of the kids, go to activities, So there's an extreme pressure and stress put on women that we can see from the pandemic. The pandemic has also increased the gender gap, which is really bad. We've worked hard, for women to come up and meet men. And according to, let's get this one right, the Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, that's a long one, it's going to take us 250 years before the economic participation and opportunity for women is equal to men. 257. That's up from 202 years in the last year's report. So it's still, you know, in another lifetime. And so going forward with hybrid work, remote work, post-pandemic, we have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, the stress we put on women and the extra work that they have. And we have to make sure, as Johanna said, that they're visible to management so that we see the issues, that we talk about them, and we involve them. And that was another topic as well. And we've talked a lot about this last year, the year before that, inclusion, diversity, and equality. It's, you know, they talk about it in every topic, even if it comes to the pandemic, sports, and basically everything. So inclusion, diversity, and equality, it's in everything we do. We have to be better. We have to do more in order to meet up to the criteria and involve everyone, even if it's women, race, whatever, like Johanna said, if it's that we're spread out across the world. It has been proven that inclusion and diversity is key for innovation. So people who are different, they drive innovation. So going forward, we have to be better. We have to do more in every different area that we work on. So a lot of negative stuff, but we also want to highlight the good things when it comes to women. Like Johanna mentioned in the beginning, this was an historic event. There were more women than men at the conference. We saw a lot of female speakers. They were activists, CEOs, whistleblowers speaking up, delivering important messages. And one great example of this one was Linda Sarsour. She's a political activist and co-founder of Until Freedom. She talked a lot about what we are willing to sacrifice to help people who are living in injustice across the world. And she also talked about the pros and cons of social media and technology. So on the positive note, technology has given women a voice, women and other people living in injustice. And we see a new wave thanks to technology, a new wave of feminists. They have more digital skills. They come from, you know, a movement from the streets to the internet. But, you know, we still have a long way to go when it comes to hate speech and threats. And she emphasized the problem, you know, with the platforms that we have to protect people's voices, and people, you know, spreading the word, they have to be protected. So we still have a long way to go when it comes to activism, but also people who live in injustice getting their voices heard and the word spread.
So it was the misabuse of the platforms that made Thierry Henry, the big soccer star, boycott all social media platforms in protest of that, the hate speech, the bullying, the harassment that he and his fellow teammates were experienced online. And this topic actually came back so many times during the whole conference. And one of the rock stars in tech, when he went on stage, it was this incredible screaming and cheering and clapping. So Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, was there, and he was talking about the intention of internet, what he, 1989, thought that they were creating, and a lot of the parts that didn't go as planned. So the silos containing this data and controlling the data and controlling the personal data, and those silos where they are kind of out of the law system. You are able to do a bit whatever you want, and there's no one that is criminal, so has criminal liability on those platforms. And when we're talking about silos and data, it's really hard not coming into Meta, or formerly known as Facebook. So yeah, here it comes.
Metaverse. Going back.
One more.
Yeah, one more. like that. Yes, metaverse was a big buzzword at the conference, of course. And what is metaverse? Well, it was not really clear during the conference, but the discussions are that this is the future of internet. This is where we're heading. Different types of worlds, kind of, that are shaped by different companies, where perhaps Meta is one of them. But the discussion was a lot about what do we want this to be, and what will the purpose be of the metaverse? Why should we even have it? One speaker was a chat between Roblox and Sara Larsson, and they done a concert in the metaverse, meaning that she could meet her avatar fan base and interact with them in a digital setting. And that is one way that it could be used, where people don't need to travel to be a part of a big event, and where artists can, in a safe way, interact with their fans. And it's also less traveling, and it's more accessible for more people. Another discussion was that it could be maybe it's more like an arena for a new arena for communication, or is it primarily for commerce? What's also was discussed that in order to make this interesting, perhaps we shouldn't make it as like ordinary life today. Maybe we want to make it a bit different, but in order to make it interesting, it should be dynamic, acknowledging the person being there, and interactive somehow. But what will the creators gain out of creating this metaverse? And how can we, as users of or beings in the metaverse, protect our own data? And this Facebook book becoming Meta was a bit like conspiracy theory that perhaps they changed the name just quickly to own the space, to own the name. Or was it to cover up this whistleblowing, like to take away the discussions from the whistleblowing thing? We don't know, but it's interesting.
You got to be a bit impressed by Meta or Facebook. Coming back to Web Summit every year, and they are getting hard questions. They are being questionized. They are being discussed and debated, and they are still there. So that's actually a bit impressive. So it is super clear that the data issue is still a big problem. The privacy issue is a really big problem, and they are not solved. And we are not actually near a solution to it. The need of regulations and laws is higher than ever. But on the bright side, the first time for many years since we have a new president in US, there are actually now ongoing discussions between the US and Europe. They have been frozen for a couple of years during the Trump administration, but now we are back on track, and Europe and America is trying to find a path where they can agree, because the European Union doesn't want to release big chunks of data to the Americans, but still the American companies are so major and a big part of this world. And they need data. So this kind of flow, how can we provide enough data so the big tech companies can still evolve, but still how can we protect the personal integrity? Ja, vad gör vi?
Here we go. Another company that's hard to ignore when it comes to security regulations and privacy is Apple. And Apple really rarely makes an appearance outside their own product events, basically never outside of the US. So this year they sent Craig Federighi, the Senior Vice President of Software Engineering, to come speak at Web Summit. And just by Apple being there, it really emphasizes how important the discussion of and the engagement that this issue creates. And it was a unique experience. It was in this big arena and kind of felt like we were at a concert. He got this rock star, kind of like Sir Tim Berners-Lee, welcome from the audience. And so before they welcomed him out on the stage, they asked everyone, to turn on the lights on their iPhones and iPads or, other Apple devices. And so he came out and he really emphasized, that cybersecurity is the next big thing. And his keynote addressed the issue of sideloading, so meaning downloading apps outside of the App Store, and the risks that will mean for user privacy and user security. And so this speech was a response to the EU's draft legislation, where they proposed that App Store open up to third-party app stores. So right now, Apple has a really strict human review process before allowing apps in their App Store, in contrast to, for example, Google Play Store, where it's widely accepted to sideload apps. So there are different perspectives here. And he said that during the past 4 years, Android devices have had 15 to 47 times more malware infections than iPhones. So that's a hard fact we can't ignore, but there's still different sides of the issue here. And he held a really convincing speech. He is a great rhetorician. And I think we were all convinced that this is the way to go. Sitting there, kind of felt like we were in a cult. And his speech, it was built upon metaphors, and he was really tapping into emotions, using metaphors about our home security being breached. So it was a really powerful speech from Craig, and from Apple being at this event was a big and huge happening overall for Web Summit.
Yeah, we all believe that poor Apple, like EU is making it tricky for them. And also think the European Union, should they really do this kind of laws? But the day after, I was sitting and listening to another part of this discussion, listening, for example, to a person from Spotify and some other companies, and they had a completely different view. That Apple, being this huge company, they're tilting the discussion in their favor. It's not about security. They can keep things secure. This is about them losing a lot of money if people don't have to put their apps into their app store. So it's not security, it's money and power. And this is also, this is super interesting. Also, the day before saying poor Apple, and the day after no, they are mean. These poor developers putting their from small companies putting their apps into the App Store and need to pay this big company Apple a lot of money. And this is also interesting for Web Summit. There was a lot of these kind of discussions going on. It was not just one point of view, it was many point of views that made you really think. And maybe perhaps there are need of laws to control these big companies that are more or less like governments today, to secure that we don't get monopoly and to foster innovation. Yeah.
So, yeah. One point of view raised this year with a higher tone of voice than earlier is should there be personal criminal liability for data protection breaches? Because looking at the companies, they are it is people making the decisions to breach, and so now it's a big data lobbyist movement around the criminal liability to those kind of breaches. What they have seen with GDPR, for example, is that some companies are putting money away in the budget so they can pay the fee and then go happily on ever after. It's kind of a counterproductive way of having a regulation. So if we think about data and data protection, I think a lot of us can't really understand the issue with it, and it's what's the big fuss about? But if you stop and think about it, it's not just about who you're friend with or which pages you like. It is how all your collected data, and if take Facebook, for example, Meta, if they don't get the data from you there, they buy it somewhere else. So because the purpose of the usage of private data is to get us and my free will to act on their purpose. And it's a bit scary, but it is how it's working right now, and this is why we need to get something done about it. So going back to Sir Tim Berners-Lee question, can it be fixed? Yes, it can be fixed, and it is the future is here, or we are going into it. The new normal is going to be whatever we make of it, and the new normal or the future is going to be what you guys make of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna, Rebecka, Millie. Always so inspiring. This is one of my favorite great events during the year. From the first that we started 3 years ago, I think it's Lindholmen. So good, because I usually go to Web Summit, but I don't have time for any seminars because I meet with people. So then afterwards, listen to you and I get everything collected. It's
the full experience.
The full experience. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Joachim, we don't have any questions from the audience.
No.
Okay, but I have some here. How do you see the consequence of pandemic? What was mentioned? Can you elaborate a little bit more of the consequence of pandemic? What they spoke about and people you met, etc.
It was a lot about this hybrid work, but also this hybrid work, but also even the most innovative and new companies that said, like, we worked hybrid for years. They said one needs to meet. You need to ensure that somehow at some point in time you need to meet, because it's super important.
Yeah, that was really a big one.
Yeah, I think we've been discussing a bit also, like, we have this global chip shortage now, because during the pandemic, stuff like that, it's going to affect us in a long time, and we're going to need to raise the production and stuff like that, and it's going to take some time to bounce back in some, but at the same time it's been accelerating progress during this last 1.5, almost 2 years now.
And that is interesting, the chip shortage. I was listening into a talk about that we need more and more chips as we build more smart stuff. We need more chips, and we have chip shortage, as many of you know. And most of the chips went to communication tools during the pandemic, and were lacking in cars and so on. Another thing that was interesting is talked about bounce back after pandemic. A lot of a buzzword was also resilience. How to build a company that is resilient to this kind of things happening that are unexpected, and that resilience can mean bounce back and transform. So you don't need to be static to be resilient. It's the other way around, how to adopt and transform.
But one interesting aspect is that a lot of the big companies are saying, okay, it was easy to send people home. It's really hard getting them back into the offices. And that I think that's kind of universal right now. You can see it everywhere. People have 1.5 years in, you're kind of used to, you have new routines and new ways. Yeah.
I think another one was as well that we saw a lot with the travel industry, that companies have had to, like, reprioritize, and they have taken the time